All right, I believe we are live. I am going to make a quick check here before we get started to make sure I'm coming through and that you folks can hear me. And then I'm going to dive right into the details of what we need to be speaking about today. So if you can hear me and I'm coming through clearly, just give me a quick thumbs up and we'll get started here. I'm going to keep a quick eye on the chat over here for comments. And I think we are good here. Let's take a quick look. And we will look at the... All right, looks like we're getting some thumbs ups, and I think we are good. All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to dive right into the subject here because we have quite a bit to talk about, and this is a bit of a more of a sensitive subject, and so I want to make sure that we are really kind of covering this in the way that it needs to be covered. And so my objectives for this first session here, I really have two basic objectives that I'm trying to cover here, all right? The first objective is that I want to make sure that you walk away with this with a little bit of education about some of the major pitfalls that exist in the BA training space, all right? I think that I'm in a bit of a unique position to be talking about this subject because I've spent the last 17 years doing nothing but business analysis, but I've also spent the last 5 to 6 years actually building out a business analysis training program. And I think there are very few people in the world that have both of those perspectives. And what I'd like to do is to kind of combine both of those perspectives in today's workshop and to kind of tell you about what the structure of the BA training market looks like from somebody who has the experience of actually building out a training program. So I'm kind of giving you a bit of an insider's view into how training providers think and how they structure their businesses. And the real purpose of that is for us to tackle objective number one here, right? And that is for me to educate you about some of the major pitfalls that I see from the perspective that I have, all right? Objective number two, probably even more importantly, the more important objective here is to kind of leave you with some very specific advice. I want to impart some very specific advice that can help you to make better judgment calls about where you should be allocating your resources. And the hope here is that you're being a little bit prudent with the way you expend your resources, because prudence essentially meaning that you're looking out for the best interest of the resources that you have, right? Your time, your money, your stamina, I guess is probably the best word. You want to make sure that you exercise some prudence. And that's what objective two is all about. And I'm going to give you some very specific advice on what to do. I think it's worthwhile for me to mention what my bigger goal in this whole thing is. And I'll make the screen a little bit bigger for you folks so that you can actually see it a little bit better. But I want to talk very, very little. Let me just show you the full screen here so that you can see that my bigger goal here isn't just to talk about training programs, but it is much, much wider than that, because I have a certain view of the BA training space that many people may share, but I think as a summary of what I think of this training space, I think that it's grossly inadequate in satisfying the needs in the way that I think it should be. And so my bigger goal is really to help promote this idea of building kind of the next generation of BA training programs. And part of the reason why I want to tell you and give you some advice on how to spend your money more prudently is because that you taking those actions not only serves your best interest in the short run, but it has a long-term impact of forcing BA training companies to lift their standards, right? Because the way that most markets work is that if customers continue to buy low-quality products, producers such as BA training companies like BA Blocks, we're not incentivized to build a high-quality product because we have a lot of customers who are buying our products, okay? So my bigger goal is really to kind of elevate the standards as a whole. And my hope here isn't just that you as students and people who want to purchase courses, that you get what you actually need out of the programs, but also to put pressure on us BA training providers to make sure that we're kind of living up to a higher standard than what exists in that space today. Okay, so that's my much bigger goal that I have. And as always, I will be keeping an eye on the chat here to make sure that if you have any questions that I can address them as we're going along. So we are live. Feel free to drop in questions, comments, etc. On that note of questions and comments, I should also mention that Divya, I know you asked a couple of very good questions in the last session, and I promised that if you are here in the chat right now, I promised that I would answer them in this session. I'm going to have to postpone them by one more session here, and I'll address them in the next one because I really want to focus on the subject matter here because it is a little bit sensitive. All right. So with all of that said, let's dive in. I'll take a quick look at the chat to see if anybody has any questions or any comments for me to address before I dive in here. I'm not seeing any questions or comments. The one other thing I should mention before I go in is that in the last live session that we held, I struggled a little bit to get the links that I wanted to share out to you folks. And what I've done this time around is I've done some prep work, and I'm going to drop that in the chat right now because I have added all of the links that I want to share with you out of this session. I've added that to a page on our website, and you can basically just go quickly and go to whatever links you'd like to see. And so I think I can show that on the screen as well right now. bablocks.com/links. So simple as that. That's where you'll see all of the links that I'm going to be sharing with you today. All right. So with all of that said, let's dive in because and I'd like to start this conversation talking a little bit about how I see our students, okay? As I've been mentioning in the last couple of live sessions, I've been a business analyst for quite a long time, and you're welcome to take a look at my LinkedIn profile to look at the projects that I've done and the clients that I've served. But if I was to kind of think back about my own career, I would attribute my success to the key three things that you see there, okay? I don't think that a single one of my clients or employers would hire me if I didn't have the skills. So that's always number one. Number two and three are the things that I believe, have kept my clients coming back to me over and over again and asking me to do different types of work and different types of projects for them. Okay. Number three here, I think, is something that doesn't get, especially in consulting practice, I think a lot of consultants don't share my point of view on how they should be dealing with clients, but a lot of other ones do, to be fair. But I think that it is always important to be honest to the people that you're serving. And by honesty, essentially what I mean is that I never take a point of view with my clients where I just kind of tell them what they want to hear, right? Even though in the short run that might help them, I always have this habit of kind of looking at their situation and having to break bad news to them over and over again, sometimes in certain situations. And even though there's a little bit more friction in the way that I do that, over the long term, you find that your clients will trust you a lot more if they can trust you to give them very objective advice instead of just kind of telling them what they want to hear, right? And so I've kind of taken this approach for my entire consulting career. I've been a consultant for 10 years. And that, I believe, is what has kept me successful as a BA consultant. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this is because I see my students not as really kind of just customers who are buying my products, right? I see my students as clients. And part of the reason why I'm going to tell you a lot of the stuff I'm telling you today is because I want to make sure that you're equipped with the information that you need to be pursuing your own best interests here, okay? A lot of what I'm about to say here is probably not going to be liked by a lot of other training providers, a lot of other BA companies, the companies that provide BA training programs. Many of them are likely not going to like a lot of what I have to say here, but they're not my clients, right? My clients are the folks who are trying to learn how to become business analysts. Those folks I consider to be my clients, and I am holding this session in the best interest of who I believe my clients are. And again, these are the folks that I think are trying to build solid skills to be able to do this job properly. Okay, so our students, I believe, are my clients. Okay, so having said all of that, let's get into the subject matter at hand. I had published a video last year where I talked about the difference between certificates and certifications. And this, I believe, is the very first link in that links page. So you don't have to go to it now, but you'll have a link to that video in that links page that I dropped into the chat. But the reason why I published this video is because I was seeing a lot of misinformation in our profession about the difference between certificates and certifications. And in this video, I essentially tried to get the key takeaway of the fact that for-profit training companies like BA Blocks and like a lot of other training programs that exist, a lot of these types of training programs do not have the authority really to certify you as a business analyst. And it's a long video where I essentially just walked through and I explained in a lot of details about why that is, okay? And I'm going to start this conversation by taking a couple of the things out of this picture here, right? We're going to talk a little bit about students, right, who are the employees of the employers. And we're going to talk about the training companies. And to really kind of illustrate many of the points, I'm going to talk to you about the vested interest that students have versus training companies have and why the situation that exists today does, so that we can figure out how to overcome them, right? If you look at students, right? You as a potential student or somebody who wants to learn business analysis, if I was to kind of explain to you how I view a student and what they're trying to accomplish, I would kind of paint the following picture, okay? And what the following picture is kind of the vested interests, I would call it, that a student has. What do students actually want, okay? If you look at this diagram, essentially, I think that students, this green hollow circle right here kind of explains it the best. I think most students are looking to build skills and capabilities, right? But the overall goal that most students have usually falls into one of three categories, right? It's usually related to income, right? So somebody's trying to learn a certain skill so that they can boost their income. They like to have a certain level of, I'm going to call it status, but there is a certain amount of credibility that you can gain as a professional when you say, look, I'm a business analyst and I work for company X. That gives you a certain level of credibility and a certain level of status. And there's no really harm in admitting that. That's something that people pursue. And the third thing is really around just making sure that they're living a greater kind of meaningful life. And so for analysts who actually enjoy their work and they're spending, 8 to 10 hours a day in certain cases working, spending that big chunk of a life of your life working, you want to make sure that it's somewhat meaningful and enjoyable. If I was to kind of sum it up from my point of view, how I see our students and what they want, and through my experience of having a lot of students and seeing what they wanted, those tend to be the top three things. Now, for a student to want to gain skills, what they have to do here is they may have to spend a little bit of money, right? The ideal situation is that you can gain those skills and capabilities without having to spend that money, but that reality doesn't really exist because everything costs money. Okay, so this is like, these are the basic wants and kind of the factors that factors into a student's mindset when they are going out to the market. Is everything that I'm saying making sense so far? We're about to look at this side of the same picture for trainers, okay, and training companies overall. Take a quick look at the chat to see if we have any questions. And again, any questions or any comments, feel free to drop them in, but I'll keep moving forward until I see anything popping up in the chat here. And I'm just gonna kind of close this for a second. Just bear with me here, please, so that I can see what it is. All right. So let's keep moving forward here. So that is what the mind of a student looks like. The mind of a training company looks a little bit like this, okay? Training companies exist because there are usually two main factors, right? As a trainer, as somebody who wants to teach other students, one of my big goals here is to, like, it's a business, right? So the company has to make a certain amount of money. But as somebody who wants to do this, it can't really just be about the money, right? There has to be some desire for somebody like me to mentor other people to kind of grow in their careers and their professions the same way I have. So for me personally, that is a major part of the reason why I do this. But both of those factors kind of come into play when a training company is trying to build a company like this or trying to build a service like this for students. Okay. Now, those are the things that somebody like me really wants out of a program that gets built. The things that have to really kind of happen to make sure that these objectives are met: sales and marketing, courses, and then something I like to just call sustainability. And we'll talk about that in just 1 second. Okay. So these are kind of like the mindsets of the two groups that are kind of involved in this. Now, for a student, right? For a student to be able to get the benefits that they're looking for, they essentially have to part with a little bit of their money. And that money is really kind of going through this flow right here to the trainer. And in an ideal situation, right? In an ideal situation, you would hope that the training company has put way more emphasis on the course materials to be able to provide that value, right? So the way that you think about it is that in an ideal situation where there are very good, high quality training companies out there, their courses should really give a disproportionate amount of value to the students in comparison to what the students are spending here, right? So if you spend $1,000, you should get way more than $1,000 worth of value. It can be a little bit hard to describe in the short run, and I can kind of help you make some of those calculations in another session if you want. But in an ideal situation, this is the situation that you want, right? You want your trainer, right, to really kind of pursue the value that they get from mentorship over the value that they get out of profit. And in doing so, they should really be putting all of their effort into the course materials and the things that are actually important to students, right? I think from my own point of view, I think that the unfortunate reality from a lot of what I've seen is that the picture doesn't look like what you just saw. It actually looks a lot more like what you're seeing on my screen now. Okay. And I'll go back to that previous picture in a second so you can see the difference, right? The ideal situation is something that looks like this. You spend relatively small amount of money for the value that you're getting out of the course, and that your trainer is hopefully kind of striking a really good balance between their responsibilities as a mentor versus their profit incentive, right? The reality that I have observed as somebody who has taken training programs, but has also built a training program and seen how other training programs run their businesses, unfortunately, this is the reality that I see. And the biggest difference between these is that, and I'll give examples of all of these things, all right? But the biggest issue that I see here is that I see an overwhelming amount of emphasis on sales and marketing and on the training companies trying to make sure that their business is sustainable. And what gets lost, what gets compromised in this type of a situation is the benefit that a student is getting out of the course. And you can see that relative to what the student is spending in this situation, right? They're getting very great marketing, right? They're getting a lot of very slick stories that are being told, and a lot of the things that marketers typically do. I'm not a professional marketer, and I don't want to offend anybody, but that's what you're getting for your price, from my observations, right? Now, for somebody who is like an Ingrid, and if you don't know who Ingrid is one of our, it's kind of one of our archetypes, BA archetypes. I'll show you another video where you can learn who she is. But she has about 5 years of experience, and she kind of knows what she's doing, but she doesn't have any formal training. Somebody who wants to be a student like Ingrid, she comes in saves up enough money to be able to take a course, and she starts scanning the market to see what kind of training programs are available to her, right? What is she going to be met with? Is she going to be met in the BA training industry with a ton of super high quality training programs? My point of view, unfortunately not. What she's going to be met with is a lot of really great emphasis on marketing, because that's where a lot of these training companies are spending a lot of their time and effort is in their marketing, right? And in that marketing, there's a very high chance that somebody like an Ingrid is going to run into the following types of things. Okay, and I have to be totally honest with you here. And some of you, this might be the first time that many of you are hearing a training provider talk like this, right? But know that I'm not just a training provider. I'm also a practitioner. I do this job and I know what it takes to actually do this job. And when I come into a space like this and I see how other training providers are behaving, and not all of them, but many of them, more of them than should be behaving this way, I get a little bit disheartened, right? Because I say, why is our space operating this way, right? You see a lot of misinformation, right? And if you have watched any of the videos, I'll show you one of the videos that I had published here, right? One of the videos I've already talked about here, right? I published this video about the difference between certifications and certificates. There's a lot of misinformation in our profession about this. And training providers are not doing anything to help. They're actually muddying the waters even more than they should be, right? Their jobs, if they claim to love the profession and they claim to want to serve the best interests of students, should be to add as much clarity as possible and let students make their decision. But that's not what I see. I see people actually actively muddying the waters. Whether they're doing it intentionally or not, it's not, it's not up to me to decide, but I can only tell you what I see. Okay. Another piece of this type of misinformation has to do with a lot of folks who can't distinguish between business analysis and business analytics. And I started to get a lot of questions like this a couple of years ago from a lot of students who are saying, hey, I want to do a business analysis program. Why aren't you teaching Python? And it would confuse me for the first little while, because I would wonder, why is this person this confused? And I started to look into it. And eventually I realized that there is marketing out there from fairly well-established big training providers who are convoluting these two completely different professions together, right? They're basically merging these two, and in their marketing materials, it can be very confusing for somebody who's new to the profession, because they're saying, look at this well-established large company who is saying, yes, we're going to teach you business analysis, but their course curriculum is all about data science, and it's about learning how to do Python and learning how to do data analysis. Those are different professions. They're different job titles. Employers will hire business analysts, and it's very nice if you know how to do data analysis in many cases, because it comes in handy. But if they need a data analyst, they'll hire a data analyst. That's a different job. But I started to get those types of questions, and when I looked into it, I realized, oh, this is just very low quality marketing. There's a lot of misinformation. And so I started to put out some videos to try to explain in detail. So for example, in this video here, I explained in excruciating levels of detail, pushing skills from one quadrant to another to kind of explain to folks, no, these are business analysis skills. These are data analysis skills. And just because now a training company is adding a lot of this unclarity into this space, don't let that confuse you, right? But it's a bit of an uphill battle, because I see so much of it. I see so much of this type of misinformation that, I can only reach a certain amount of people here, right? And so I'm hoping that a lot of what I'm saying here kind of matches your expectations, and you're kind of starting to get a clearer idea. And I'll tell you, this was probably the first time you've heard a training provider talk like this, right? And there are reasons why that is. But as somebody like an Ingrid, right, who comes to this training space to purchase some training with her money that she saved up, she's going to be met with a lot of this type of misinformation, right? Some of the other things that I notice here, right? I have the term toxic positivity. You might be seeing it a little bit more, but I'll describe it to you in very simple terms. Toxic positivity, and it's good to be positive, right? But it's good to be realistically positive. Toxic positivity is when a person pushes themselves really hard to try to be positive regardless of their situation. And what it does to a lot of people is that it kind of disconnects them from the reality in which they have to work in. So people will just pretend to be positive all of the time, and it kind of distracts them away from actually solving a lot of their real problems. And that's when it starts to become toxic, right? It's good to be positive. I see myself as a deeply optimistic person, but I never let myself or my mind wander into a space where I start to neglect my reality, right? And that's what I mean by toxic positivity, is that it's not good state of mind to be always positive, but it does serve the interests of certain types of people, right? Because what I've learned about traditional marketing is that marketers like to have their customers in always a positive mindset, because that's the mindset that they need you to be in for you to actually spend money, right? If you're not feeling positive, the chances of you spending money on something like a training program is very low. But the pressure that a lot of marketers put on people to be positive all the time isn't a good thing. I don't see it as a good thing. I think that it should be muted, right? There's a way to remain like cautiously optimistic about reality, and it's a much more muted version of optimism and positivity, but it serves your interests much better because it doesn't disconnect you from actually making good rational decisions. You understand what I'm saying? And so again, this is one of the other characteristics. I see quite a bit of very high pressure sales tactics. And I'm going to give you an example in just a second. But these things here, right? These three things that I've outlined here, I'll ask you, do you think that it describes a scenario that looks like this, where the trainer and the mentor is putting all of their effort in the courses and trying to do just enough sales and marketing to let people know that their program exists? Or do you believe that it fits much more into a situation like this, where you have your training providers putting a ton of effort, a lot of pressure, and everything they can possibly do, rewriting their sales copy, doing whatever they have to do to be able to extract your money from you, right? You got to think to yourself, which one of these interests is it serving? Is it serving the interests of somebody who sees themselves as having a responsibility as a mentor, right? If somebody calls me up and says, can you give me some objective advice? What should I do? Should I pursue my own financial best interest, or should I actually try to give this person honest advice, right? If I'm in pursuit of my own self-interest, then everything that I say to this person is going to direct them towards purchasing one of my courses, right? If I feel like I have a greater sense of responsibility to people who are looking to me for real help, I can't do that, right? I have to take on that responsibility and say, yeah, I have my own financial best interest here. Let's park that for a second. Let's look at your situation and see what the right path is for you. What would I personally do to make sure that you're getting to the right place? Like, a lot of training providers, from what I see, just don't even have that sense. All right. And it's a little bit off-putting, because when you read their marketing material, they claim to love the profession. They claim to want to add as much value as they possibly can, but none of their actions actually reflect that, right? And that needs to change, because you can have both things, right? Training companies can have both things, and the people who are trying to learn get the biggest benefit out of all of this, because it puts the incentive on training providers to build better materials and focus less on trying to refine their marketing messages, right? I believe that very, very deep-seated belief that I have is that if you have a good product, it should sell itself. You shouldn't need to do high-pressure sales tactics to be able to sell something to somebody, right? And with people who undertake high-pressure sales tactics like that, it's a tacit admission. It's a bit of an admission that they don't have the confidence in their own materials. And that's why they have to engage in high-pressure sales. Okay? And so what do I mean by high-pressure sales? Let me give you an example. And I'll ask you, okay? Imagine you received an email like this from somebody, and I'll read it to you very quickly, right? you imagine you received an email like this from somebody who says, hey, yes, our program costs a lot of money, right? But if you feel like you can't afford it, you can basically split it up across a bunch of different credit cards, right? If you receive a message like that, I consider this to be high pressure sales tactics, right? And again, as somebody who, let's talk a little bit about the mindset of a person who is forced to take this option, right? And I'll speak to you from, I guess, from a trainer's point of view. From a trainer's point of view, or from a mentor's point of view, if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I can't afford your course, right? And my response to that person is, well, how much credit do you have? Okay. Oh, you've maxed out 2 of your credit cards? What about the other 3 credit cards that you have? Do you have enough room in each of those where you could squeeze in, right, the cost of the course? Like, what kind of a response is that? And that is, again, it's a little bit off-putting, right? And it's much worse than that, because this is very, very high-pressure sales tactics. In the mindset of a person who is relying on somebody to give them good, clear guidance, right? They're relying on that person to look out for this person's best interest. But something like this, I'll tell you from the point of view of a trainer, something like this is not looking out for the best interest of a student, right? Because a person who has to really kind of, if a person is kind of maxed out all of their credit cards, what kind of a financial position are they in? Are they in the type of position where they can afford a $3,000 to $5,000 program? And keep in mind that these programs will not change your life overnight. Okay, they will not. It takes time between the time you learn these skills and that you learn how to apply them properly, and by the time you start to see the financial results, it can take a year, it can take 2, sometimes 3 years, depending on a lot of factors, right? But if I am pushing my students, right, who are probably on the edge financially, if I'm pushing them to do things like this just to be able to afford my program, am I looking out for my own financial best interest, or am I looking out for the best interest of my students? I mean, that's a question that has to be asked, and it's a question that has to be answered, because I do not see that. I can't ever fathom asking a person to do something like this. I think it completely crosses so many boundaries that are totally off bounds for somebody who claims to be a mentor and somebody who claims to be looking out for the best interest of other people. Things like this in some industries are illegal, right? Our profession and the BA training space isn't regulated by the government. And so it's not illegal for people to say things like this. But in certain industries, making these kinds of statements is illegal, right? So that's how far something like this goes. And when I go back to talking about this, right, the trap of sales and marketing is all of these tactics accumulate. And marketers are so well versed, they've figured out so many of the tricks and the tactics that they have to get somebody to kind of give them their money, that it's like a science to them now, right? There are certain specific buttons they're supposed to push to kind of manipulate a person into making a purchase for something. And a person, like as a person, if I was to claim to you that, yeah, I'm going to provide you some mentorship. Yeah, of course I have my financial best interest, but I'll provide you with some mentorship. And then I start employing these kinds of tactics against you. I don't know how I would be able to claim both of those things, right? To say, yes, of course I'm looking for your financial best interest, but why don't you just max out all of the whatever you have in your credit and start paying 20% interest on the fee? Like that, those two things do not match up, right? I can't claim to be looking out for your best interest and give you that kind of advice. Those things, they simply just don't match up, right? And again, I don't want this to be a negative conversation, but I think as students, you need to understand what this situation looks like so you can find your way out. And I'll give you a couple of ways out in a couple of minutes. All right. I'll give you some very specific things that you should be doing to make sure that you're pursuing your own personal best interest. All right. So you see, so I hope that that kind of gives you an idea, of what the market structure looks like and kind of what my view of this, what market structure looks like. All right. Now let's take a look, and it gets a little bit worse, unfortunately. So I'll talk about the rest of it, and then we can have a conversation afterwards if you have any follow-up questions. But let's take a look back at the Ingrid, right? Coming to the table, looking to purchase a program to try to better her life. She's met with a lot of these types of tricks and tactics in the marketing that she's experiencing. Now, let's say that she goes through, right? She goes through all of this. She doesn't know any better, right? And the person who she thinks is looking out for her best interests is kind of using a lot of these tricks and tactics to get her to purchase a program. Ingrid, right? Let's say, for example, so let's say Ingrid comes to the table in a situation like that, and she parts with her money, right? So her money, go back, I'll do that again one more time so you can see this, right? Here, Ingrid has her money. Here, she's kind of given her money away and enrolled into a course. So let's take a look at what Ingrid's experience looks like here, right? So she got wowed by the marketing. She spent her money, right? And she entered into a course. And once she gets into the course, she says, okay, well, the quality of this doesn't really match the quality of the marketing, right? The marketing was so slick, so many promises made, so many big, great stories told about success and this and that. But I'm starting to get the sense that the quality of the training program isn't up to the same level as the marketing, right? And with a lot of these types of programs, and trust me, I've been through one of these types of programs, and I've spent my hard-earned money very early on in my career. So I'm speaking a little bit from experience here. But you run into a situation, you think, oh, this isn't that good or as good as I expected it. And you say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go through it a little bit more to figure it out. At this point, some people might be inclined to ask for their money back. Okay. And then that's one of the traps, right? Because many of the refund policies of the courses, and we'll talk about this in a couple of minutes, but many of the refund policies are structured in a way where somebody like an Ingrid can't just back out of this deal very easily now, right? She's handed $5,000 over to the training provider. She came in, she saw what she didn't like. She wants to get back out, but she's stuck because the refund policy doesn't allow that, right? So she says, all right, I'll try to make the best of this and get to the end of the class. Not totally happy with the class, but now she says, okay, well, it was something, but at the very least, I can at least express my honest opinions about my experiences in this course, right? She thinks that. But what she doesn't realize is that as part of signing up for the course, she agreed to some terms and conditions that don't even allow her to do that. Okay. And again, this is illegal in certain industries. I won't go through all of the details, but essentially a clause like this binds a student to say, it doesn't matter if you didn't like the course. It doesn't matter even if I promised you something and I didn't deliver it, it doesn't matter. You're now legally bound to not say anything about this, right? And that is what a clause in a contract like this does to a person, right? Is it kind of locks them in. So a lot of slick marketing, you gave your money, you came in and you thought, okay, I'm going to try to back out. Can't back out because the refund policy, you say, well, I'll make the best of it. At least I can maybe give an honest review so I can kind of get some stuff maybe off my chest, but maybe to warn other people what the course is like. No, you're stuck. You better not say anything because you're now contractually bound into a situation where you're not allowed to even say anything, even if it's just an honest review to say, hey, maybe certain parts of the course were good, but here are some areas where it's lacking. You're not allowed to make a statement like that based on a clause like this, right? Now, again, stuff like this is illegal in certain domains, right? And trying to keep people quiet is really a bit of a tactic that many companies use to make sure that they can continue with the current state of the situation. And what is the current state of the situation? We can go back. Current state of the situation is this, right? Ingrid has come in, spent her hard money because of the slick marketing. She got into a course that is probably way below the value that she was looking for, but she made the best of it. She now went out and tried to warn the rest of the folks, and she could not do that because of this. And now you can see that Ingrid is trapped. Can't get out this way, can't get out that way. And money is gone, the value isn't there. This person is now stuck. What are they going to do? Right? It exists in our profession, right? And I think that this is a very low standard for how to build a good training business. And part of what I'm going to tell you about what you should be demanding from training providers is going to help to lift that standard, right? Unless you ask for people to do better than they're currently doing today, status quo is not going to change. And that industry is not going to change. And you're not going to benefit from the changes that would be coming from an industry like that. All right. So avoid the trap and try to see if we can do certain things to get ourselves back into an ideal situation. What is an ideal situation, right? The ideal situation, again, is that there is very high quality courses that exist all over the place. And again, I don't want this to just be a sales pitch for BA Blocks. I think you should demand this of anybody and everybody out there, and make sure that you are very prudent with your resources, right? That you are looking out for your own best interest, because a lot of people who try to position themselves as advisors are just positioning themselves as advisors from a marketing sense. They're not actually playing that role for you, okay? The financial industry in both the US and Canada was so rife with this that the government had to step in and said, no, you can't do these types of things, right? You have to look out for your client's best interest, and they made it a law. Again, our profession, the training industry doesn't have those kinds of protections. They don't have those types of laws. So it's really kind of you really got to look out for your own best interests here, right? You got to find people who you think you can trust to help you look for your best interests. And very importantly, you have to be very careful of many of the tricks and tactics that exist in the training space that will make you believe certain things that are not true. Right? We've already seen a perfect example of how you can kind of get trapped in. And all the examples that I've given you are real examples, right? These are real examples from BA training providers in our profession that are operating today. All right. This is the ideal situation, right? Ingrid gets in, she looks at a course, she says, yeah, I'm not happy, I want out, right? She can exit back out this way, right? Or if she says, you know, I'm going to go through the course, there are good things about your course and not so good things about your course, and I want to be able to express myself so that the people who are thinking about taking this course have a realistic picture of what's going on. Like, she should be allowed to do something like that. Because unless she's allowed to do something like that, see, that preventing a person from giving an honest review cuts off the feedback loop that future students need. Right? Future students are looking to current students and saying, hey, how was the course? I'm trying to decide whether I should take this. But you've seen an example of how the way that many course providers structured their businesses cuts that feedback loop completely off. And what it does is it creates a situation where you may be on LinkedIn or on YouTube or wherever, and you're seeing so many people saying so many good things about a certain training program, and you try to Google an honest review and you think, oh, I can't find anything negative. This program must be spectacular, right? That's how a lot of people are going to think about it, because they're not thinking, oh my God, no, there's a lot of suppression going on potentially a lot of suppression going on of students not kind of being able to speak their words. And I'm not really accusing these companies of doing that. I'm saying the way their businesses are structured facilitates that. Right? So I don't want to come out here and say that, hey, these businesses for sure 100% are doing this. I'm saying that's just the way their business is structured, and kind of the proof is kind of in the pudding, right? It's in the agreements, it's in the marketing, right? And so I think you have to demand more. I think you have to demand more, and I think that you have to hold people to a much higher standard to make sure that you're getting the value, the true value for the money that you're spending, because these programs are not cheap and they're not easy, right? If this was a low ticket program, if you're just going to go buy a chocolate bar and they priced it at 99 cents instead of $1. You say, okay, I see what you're doing there. You're trying to make it seem like it's costs less than $1 so that I'll be more inclined to buy it. Fine, it's a chocolate bar. I'll spend $1. BAPC costs $3,000. That's not a cheap program, right? Many other programs cost much more, right? This is not a small ticket item, and you have to perform the right level of due diligence to make sure that you're avoiding a lot of the traps that exist in this space. All right. Now, how do we get over this? I'll tell you at least 3 things, but I think you can do more, right? And I think that the antidote to all of these types of issues are kind of all listed on this page here, but we'll talk about them one by one. I think that the most powerful tool that you have at your disposal is refund policies. Okay. If you have a fair refund policy, and I'll explain to you what I believe is a fair refund policy. If you have a fair refund policy, it facilitates exactly this situation right here. Ingrid gets in. She says, you know what? I've gotten a taste of this. Not for me. I'd like out, please. And she should be able to claim a full refund, no questions asked, right? As a course provider, you have to protect yourself as well so that people are not exploiting that mechanism. So you can put certain rules that are fair, right? And I'll tell you that in the refund policies for our BAPC course, very simple. You are entitled to a full refund until the end of the first day. You can get all the materials, you can get onboarded onto the course, you show up the first day, and even at the end of the first day, you say, you know what, Emal, it's not for me. I don't want to give you any more details, but I'd like a refund, please. And the refund is yours. No questions asked, no harm done, no hard feelings, right? And what that does for you, right? Having a fair refund policy gives you the ability to have voluntary relationships, right? You can purchase something with the confidence of knowing, hey, I can back out of this up until a certain point. So I can actually go in and get a really good idea of what this program is all about and then decide, right? Do I want to do this or do I not want to do this, right? I think that the refund policy is your strongest tool. And anytime you want to sign up for a program, doesn't matter which program it is, anytime you want to sign up for a program, I think you should demand a better refund policy if you're not happy with their refund policy, right? Many programs will say, you're not entitled, if the minute you give me your money, you're not entitled to a refund until you finish the course, you've put all of your time into it, and you've demonstrated to me that you haven't gotten the value, and then I'll give you a refund. That can take 6 months, right? Sometimes it can take a year to get to the end of that process. And at the end of that process, you might not even get a refund. And now imagine if you're the first type of person who put this on your credit cards, right? Now you're paying 20% interest on something that you want to get a refund on for a full year. I think it creates a it's a lot less than ideal. Let's just leave it at that point. Creates a situation that is a lot less than ideal for students. And so demand a fair refund policy. And if you want an example, use the refund policy from BA Blocks. I think I have it in the list of links that I added. I'll add these links into the chat one more time. And I see a lot of comments there. I'll get to your comments in just a second. I'll share that links one more time. If you click on that link, and again, don't even think about, even if you don't want to sign up for training program at BAPC, at least use our refund policy as a leveraging tool, right? If you got another training program that you really like, but you just don't like the refund policy, take our refund policy and say, look, why can't you give me a refund policy like this? And I'll sign up, right? If you don't want to sign up for BA Blocks courses, at the very least, use our refund policy as a negotiating tool. And even that'll take you much farther, right? And because refunds, the refund policy is a very strong tool, okay? Can you see the materials before you sign up? Somebody who has confidence in their program should say, yeah, here is a big chunk of what we cover, and I'll walk you through, X, Y, and Z. Many companies do some of this. They describe it to you about what you're getting. So I think on that front, they're good, but you can expect to see more if you want, right? Many of the companies out there tend to do a very good detailed description of what they cover, right? Whether that's good enough to give you the skills or not, that's a different question. That's a different conversation we can have, but they'll tell you what they have. So terms in the contract, right? We've already seen one example of a term in a contract that I believe shouldn't exist in any contracts, because again, it kind of distorts the messages, right? Distorts the signals that students look for, right? If it's just constant positive feedback and all negative feedback is suppressed, that's not a clear picture for people to look to figure out whether it's a good program or not. That's a very distorted picture, because you've essentially just cherry picked all of the good news and you've suppressed all of the bad news to be able to pursue your own interest of selling more courses, right? That's not serving students. That's serving the program, right? Now, the third one is, I would say, check the claims of people. I see a lot of people who claim to be business analysts, and some of them have never been a business analyst, right? But in their marketing copy, the marketing materials that they publish, they'll say, oh yeah, as a business analyst, I do X, Y, and Z, but I don't know how even that works, because are students just not validating that to say, hey, are you really a business analyst? Like, even just if you scratch a little bit below the surface, I think you start to see a lot more of the reality of what's actually going on, right? One of the things that I've learned about marketing that I really don't like a lot is that a lot of marketers have this belief that it's okay to really kind of fake it till you make it, right? Hey, if you don't have an expertise, but you want to sell a product, just pretend like you do that job. It's okay. You'll eventually learn it through your own training materials, right? Like there's this mentality that it's okay to kind of bend the truth in certain ways to make things look better than they are. And I am not a huge fan of this way of thinking at all. And again, I've learned all of these things just in the last couple of years as I've been trying to build a training program, right? I'm trying to figure out, hey, how would I market a program like BA Blocks? How do I get people to actually know that this thing exists? And I've run into a lot of training materials, and some of the advice that is out there in the marketing space is definitely not for me. Definitely not for me. But I don't think it should exist in the space at all. Quite frankly, I don't think it should exist in any space, but the only thing I really feel like I have the power to change here is the BA training space, right? I can't change the whole world, but I think marketers and business analysts are very different types of people, right? Because they're so comfortable kind of stretching the truth in certain directions that an analyst wouldn't even think to do. It wouldn't even occur to them. Because as an analyst, your job is to provide clarity, right? I'm wired in many ways to clarify definitions and to provide as much clarity as I can to people, right? That's what I do as part of my profession, right? And so when I run into people who think, yeah, no, it's okay to twist reality in this direction. It's okay to say that, even though it might not be 100% true. You know what? It just makes things look good. Just do it. Sorry, that's not the way that analysts think, right? And I refuse to kind of take part in that world. But if you refuse to take part in that world as well, you'll see that standards overall are going to get raised, and you'll have a lot of other options, right? You'll have a lot of other options of training providers who say, no, we're going to do good marketing, and we're going to put all of our time and effort into building a very solid product or a very solid program for students so that we don't even have to worry about it, right? I'll show you this, just going back to this here, right? Even if you just look at, I'll show you the version of this ideal situation. Even if you look at this, right? This ideal situation is one where you focus so much on building a good product that it just kind of sells itself. It totally removes your need to actually have to do any real kind of sales and marketing. You definitely don't have to do any tricks, right? And as a training provider, you don't have to do any tricks. Just build something really good and just tell people about it, and it should sell itself. I truly believe that that's the case. And I do the same thing for my consulting clients, right? I'm always focused on building something really, really good when I'm working as an analyst, or helping the team to build something really, really good, right? There's a huge emphasis on that. And I say, look, if as long as we build something good, the rest will kind of take care of itself in many different ways. And that's where all of the emphasis should be. All right. So I won't go on and on. I think that if you do your part here, you will serve your own best interest. And I think that you're going to get the best results. And it doesn't matter, right? If you see me crossing any of these lines, if you see, in a year I changed my refund policy to something that you don't like, come back to me. Come back and point me out here and say, hey, Mal, I don't like your new refund policy. I remember you told me, a year ago that I should be demanding more. So now I'm demanding more, right? This recording is going to exist, right? On LinkedIn, it'll exist on YouTube. And you have the power, but you have to kind of exert a little bit of that pressure on training providers to make all of that possible. All right. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm going to scan through the comments here to see what kind of questions we have. There's a LinkedIn user here. It doesn't show your name, unfortunately, but it says, I've seen this unfortunate reality many times than I care to have. The worst are training programs claiming to certify BAs, not being clear that their certifications are self-proclaimed. Yeah, they're not gold standard in certification, with respect to the industry. So LinkedIn user here, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, but I mean, I totally agree. Like in that video that I have in our links page here that I shared, if you go to this links page, I'll open it up and show you folks. I totally agree with that comment, but I agree to it to a point where I've actually created a whole video to talk about the difference between certificates and certifications, so to try to provide folks with a little bit of clarity, right? There's a whole 15-minute video that you folks can go out there and watch. So thank you for the comment. I think that that's excellent. It says another LinkedIn user. Yeah, they're just looking out for themselves. In terms of professional BA/BSA training, I've really experienced an ideal situation, thankfully, after having plenty of experience, various trainers and training companies. I finally found, this looks like, I'm sorry, I was reading this offline. This looks like it could have been written by by me, but it wasn't. But it doesn't show who the LinkedIn user is. It'll show it afterwards. But I think this is one of our students here. Support. I think I might know who this is. But yeah, thank you. I mean, look, what I try to do is I try to teach analysts how to do a job that I have a very true and clear picture of doing myself. Absolutely agree with you, Danielle. Okay. So yeah, I think that was Danielle's comment, very likely. High pressure sales tactics, etc. So lots of comments around that. We have a question around how to get domain expertise. Example in fintech. I would say the short answer for that is to get possibly look into the certification materials for the domain that you're looking for. So I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I wanted to get into the mutual fund industry, and instead of doing a business analysis certification, I decided to get certified in the securities program, and securities meaning investments. I decided to get certified in that here in Canada, right? So it's called the Canadian Securities course that I took. And they have the equivalent of it in the US, where you can't actually practice any kind of selling of securities without having that certification. I would say that that's the strategy I took, right? My strategy was learn the subject matter from the people who kind of set the standard in that area. And that was kind of the Canadian Securities course that I took. And Bodan, I would say that that's probably what you want to look into, right? So if you're looking, for example, especially in fintech, I don't know if there's any domain courses in fintech, but to learn the finance domain, you may want to look at something possibly like I think the FRM is very much oriented around financial risk, but there is another one where it is the CFA. The CFA is the I think it's kind of like the gold standard globally around learning in-depth financial domain knowledge. And you might not necessarily need to get certified. You might want to just purchase the program to get access to the courses and focus on the specific areas that you think you need for the domain that you're looking to learn about. All right. So I've covered everything that I want to cover. I know this was a bit of a difficult conversation, and I've had to think very hard about how I want to explain this, because I've been observing a lot of these things for such a long time. And I really feel like I'm at the point now where I really need to start serving the folks that I think of as my clients, and those are essentially my students, right? And the best way for me to do that is to just kind of give you a very clear idea of what I see here as how our market is structured and what you're kind of up against, and to help you make the best decisions that you possibly can. And again, it's like when I look at this, when somebody asks me, hey, Mal, is your course right for me? I don't go into marketing mode. Like, I just don't have that instinct to go into marketing mode and start trying to sell them a product. I say, explain to me your situation, right? And when they explain it to me, I say, yeah, well, these elements of the course will help you. These other elements will probably not. If I was in your position, I'd be a little bit on the fence, right? I mean, I give that kind of feedback to a lot of people who ask me whether the program's right for them once I understand their position. And I do that not because my goal, right? My goal isn't just to enrich myself, essentially. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but my goal isn't to do this, right? I think I like to have a bit more of a take on that responsibility of being a mentor and try to kind of balance my own profit incentives with trying to give good advice, and I try to do that as much as possible. I think you should try to demand more of that from the folks that you're looking at. All right. So that's all I wanted to say. I have set up another live session for Thursday for anybody who's interested in looking at BAPC. I'll walk you through the details of a previous session that we had, so you can get like a real full in-depth look at what's in that program. But other than that, if you have any questions, you can put them in here, or you can ask them in the next live session, or you can think about joining our community where we have lots of live sessions like this. You're likely to see some videos in there where, I'll talk about other things that maybe a lot of training providers might not necessarily want a training provider to be talking about. But again, I think my clients aren't other training providers, right? My clients are students who are trying to build their skill sets. So I'll do my best to look out for your best interest. I'll take a quick look to see if we have any other questions that are coming up here. And if not, I think we are at time. I have committed to meeting with somebody right after the session. And so if you don't have any other questions, I'll call this one, I'll call an end to this one, right? Hopefully this has been helpful. I've done my best to tell you the truth as I see it. And I think you'll have to do whatever you think is right with that information, essentially. All right. Thank you, everybody. I will hopefully see you on the next one. All right. The next one will be a lot of fun if you decide to show up. All right. Kind of make up for maybe a bit of a downer that this one was. So hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Okay. Take care, everyone.